The most dangerous spy in Jerusalem wasn't hiding in a government building or a safe house. He was standing at the front of a synagogue, holding a Torah scroll and crying at the right moments. This is not a story about a spy who got caught making mistakes. This is a story about a spy who got caught making almost none. The wooden door of a small synagogue in the Musrara neighborhood of Jerusalem opens at 5:47 every morning. The man who opens it is known to everyone in the quarter as Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi. He has been here for 6 years. He knows the liturgy without glancing at the page. He knows the names of every congregant's grandchildren. He has presided over 2 weddings, 1 bar mitzvah, and 4 funerals. He holds the Torah scroll with the exact weight of a man who has held one since childhood. The congregants love him. His real name is Cyrus Tehrani. He is 39 years old. He was born in Mossad. He holds a degree in theology from the University of Tehran, and he has never, not once in 6 years, made a single detectable error that any of his neighbors could point to. That is exactly the problem. To understand how Cyrus Tehrani ended up in Jerusalem, holding that scroll, crying those tears, you have to go back to Vienna in 2014. Not to a safe house, not to a training facility, to a small apartment in the Leopoldstadt district where a 27-year-old man sits at a table with a stack of books and begins the process of erasing himself. The IRGC's intelligence division runs what defectors and analysts would later describe as a long bridge program. The name is deliberate. A bridge takes time to build. You do not rush the foundation. You do not cut the cables. And you do not, under any circumstances, send someone across before the structure can carry the weight. Cyrus is chosen not for his physical capability, not for his weapons training. He is chosen because of one specific skill. He can inhabit a personality the way water inhabits a vessel, without leaving edges. He is a memorizer, a listener, a man with no ego attachment to his own identity, which makes him the most dangerous kind of person to put inside another one. The cover identity, Yosef Mizrahi, is not assembled quickly. It is grown. A Mizrahi Jewish identity is chosen with precision. The IRGC's planners understand the landscape. Ashkenazi rabbinical lineages come with documented paper trails, verifiable yeshiva records, living relatives who can be cross-referenced. But the Iranian Jewish community, specifically those who fled after 1979, left behind a biographical archive that is incomplete by nature. Records destroyed, families scattered, memories that cannot be confirmed by anyone still living in the country. Yosef Mizrahi's legend states he was born in Tehran in 1983. His family fled to Vienna in 1988. His parents are deceased. He studied at a small rabbinical college in Lyon, France, an institution that exists with records that are partial and are not fully checked because no one expects they will need to be. The architecture of the cover is not built to withstand scrutiny. It is built to not attract it. Cyrus spends 3 years in Vienna before he ever steps on Israeli soil. 3 years of living inside the identity, not practicing it. He attends synagogue without fail. He fasts on Yom Kippur, actually fasts, because he understands that physical sincerity is the only sincerity a religious community can sense in the body. He learns the private vocabulary, the way a man who grew up Jewish refers to Shabbat versus the way a man who studied it academically does. The grammatical tells. The pace of prayer. The exact way a person handles a sitter who learned to read Hebrew before they learned anything else. He is not performing Jewishness. He is building the memory of it, installing a childhood he never had into the muscle and reflex and breath of his daily life. This is the first and most important thing to understand about this operation. It was not a costume, it was a transplant. In late 2017, Cyrus, now fully operating as Yosef, makes Aliyah through official channels. His application is processed by the Jewish agency. His documentation has been verified by 2 separate IRGC intelligence teams, and, according to later assessments, at least 1 external contractor whose identity has never been confirmed. He passes screening. He is welcomed. He settles in Musrara. Not the Jewish quarter, which is too observed. Not the government zones, which carry too much ambient surveillance. Musrara, a neighborhood on the old seam line, historically mixed, traditionally overlooked. Close enough to sensitive residential and government-adjacent areas to be useful. Unremarkable enough to be quiet. He finds the synagogue within his first week, and here, before he has even finished unpacking, the first fracture nearly opens. The synagogue's senior congregant is a 72-year-old retired judge named Avraham Katz. He was himself born in Tehran. He left in 1978. And when he approaches Yosef after that first morning service and begins speaking to him in Farsi, with the specific accent of a man from the Yusuf Abad district, the Jewish quarter of Tehran, Cyrus has less than 3 seconds to respond correctly. He does respond correctly, fluently, with the right inflections, the right warmth, the right texture of shared memory. But he makes one error. A single phrase about a specific type of bread, sold near a specific mosque in a part of Tehran that was not the Jewish quarter. The kind of phrase that only lives in the mouth of someone who grew up near that mosque, not near that synagogue. Avraham Katz pauses. He looks at the younger man, then he smiles. "You must have had Muslim neighbors," he says. "We all did in the end." The conversation ends. Cyrus reports it to his handler. His handler tells him the cover held. Move forward. What neither of them knows, what will not become clear for years, is that Avraham Katz was not satisfied by that explanation. He simply decided not to say anything yet. Because an old man's silence in this story will turn out to be more dangerous than anything the intelligence services do for the next 4 years. Cyrus begins to build what the IRGC's program requires in the first phase. Infrastructure. Not intelligence collection. Infrastructure. Trust. Presence. The kind of deep social embedding that makes a person unquestionable, not because their documents are clean, but because the neighborhood has absorbed them into its texture. He starts teaching informal Torah classes for teenagers. He visits the sick. He argues gently about theology over tea. He is patient in a way that feels almost supernatural to the families who bring him their most difficult moments. He is not yet collecting anything of operational value. He is building the road on which information will later travel. And the road is being built in the middle of a city that runs some of the most sophisticated counterintelligence operations on Earth. He knows this. He walks through those streets every morning at 5:47, and he knows exactly where he is. The question that no one has yet thought to ask, not his handler, not Mossad, not Avraham Katz, is a simpler one. Does Cyrus Tehrani still know who he is? After 3 years in Vienna and 2 years in Jerusalem, after hundreds of Shabbat tables and 4 funerals, and the weight of a Torah scroll in his hands every single morning, is the man walking through Musrara in a black coat and hat the asset or the rabbi? And if even he is no longer certain, what does that do to a 6-year operation built entirely on the assumption that the lie is always in control? By 2019, Yosef Mizrahi is no longer a new face in Musrara. He is the neighborhood's face, the man you call when a marriage is struggling, the man you call when a father won't speak to his son, the man whose presence at your Shabbat table means the evening will be quieter, warmer, more honest than it would have been without him. This is not a coincidence, it is engineering. The IRGC's Long Bridge program does not produce spies who lurk at the edges of communities. It produces people who become indispensable to them, because indispensability creates access, and access over time creates information flow that no technical operation can replicate. You cannot hack the conversation a man has after his third glass of wine at a Shabbat table. You cannot intercept the name a woman whispers to her rabbi when she is frightened about what her husband does for work. Cyrus has been listening to those conversations for 2 years, and in early 2019, his handler Elias, operating out of Istanbul, known to Cyrus only by that single name and the outline of a communication protocol, gives the first real collection order. The task is narrow. Deliberately so. Cyrus is not asked to recruit, he is not asked to photograph. He is asked to identify, within his congregation and its extended social network, individuals with professional or familial connections to Israel's defense and intelligence infrastructure. Not their secrets, their existence, their relationships, the shape of the network around them, who attends which synagogue, who has a son in which unit, who mentions in passing a brother-in-law who works somewhere that requires a security clearance to name, who speaks loosely on Saturday afternoon because they have been inside a pressure-sealed professional world all week, and the synagogue is the one place they let it breathe. Cyrus collects this the way a gardener notes which plants grow where, without urgency, without visible interest, with the patience of a man who has already spent 5 years becoming someone else and understands that impatience is the first signature of a cover beginning to fail. He carries nothing, no device, no recorder. He memorizes. He writes nothing in identifiable form. His communications to Elias are embedded in the metadata of images posted to a private photo-sharing account, a steganographic channel that Israeli investigators will later describe as among the most disciplined dead-drop architectures they had encountered in a domestic operation. He is, by every operational measure, perfect. And this is where the assumption from Phase 1 has to be broken, because the story so far has presented Cyrus Tehrani as a man in control, a man executing a plan, a man who chose this, prepared for this, and is now delivering on the investment. That story is partially true. What it leaves out is what Elias knows that Cyrus does not. The Long Bridge program does not run one asset at a time. Cyrus is not the only insertion. He is one node in an architecture that includes at least 2 other long-term embeds in different cities, a support network of short-term couriers who service dead drops in European transit cities, and an analytical team in Tehran that aggregates everything collected across all nodes into a single targeting picture. Cyrus has never been told this. He believes his operation is standalone. He believes the information he collects flows to Elias and then to a single handler team who hold it securely. He believes that if he is burned, the network survives because it is not connected to him. This belief is not just incorrect. It is the belief that the IRGC deliberately installed in him, because an asset who thinks he is the center of a network behaves differently, more carefully, more protectively, than one who knows he is a single thread in a much larger weave. Cyrus is not protecting the network. He is protecting an illusion of the network. And somewhere in Tehran, the people who know the full picture have made calculations about acceptable loss that Cyrus has not been invited to participate in. In the spring of 2020, a wedding changes the operational geometry. Yosef is asked to officiate at the marriage of a young couple in his congregation. The groom's family is close to him. He has known the young man since he was 17. Refusing is not a real option. It would fracture the trust of 3 years in a way that no cover can absorb without visible damage. He agrees. What he does not know at the time, what Elias does not know, is that the groom's uncle is a mid-ranking officer in Unit 8200, Israel's Signals Intelligence Directorate. Elias finds out 2 weeks before the wedding through a separate collection channel. He does not tell Cyrus to withdraw. He tells Cyrus to attend, officiate, and produce a full physical description of every attendee he can identify as defense-connected. This is the operational instruction that will, 3 years later, destroy everything. Not because Cyrus fails to execute it, because he executes it perfectly. The wedding is photographed, not by Cyrus, not by anyone in the IRGC's network, by Shin Bet. The groom's uncle is under a routine internal security review, almost certainly unfounded, almost certainly resolved within weeks. The wedding is swept as a precaution. Photographs are taken of attendees. They are filed. They are not analyzed immediately. They sit in a database and wait. And in those photographs, at the edge of every important frame, stands Yosef Mizrahi, near the right people, facing the right directions, present in exactly the places a good rabbi would be present, which are also, precisely, the places an intelligence collector would position himself. The photographs sit in the database for 2 years. Cyrus doesn't know the photographs exist. Elias doesn't know the photographs exist. The Shin Bet team that took them has moved on to other cases. The collection continues. But something has shifted inside the collector. This is the part of the operation that no training program fully prepares for, and no handler fully accounts for, because it does not show up in communication intercepts or behavioral surveillance. It shows up only in the private interior of a man who has been someone else for 6 years. Cyrus Tehrani is beginning to lose the clean line between the mission and the life. Not in a way that compromises his operational discipline. His tradecraft remains immaculate. His communication protocols remain clean. He makes no detectable errors. But the funerals are real to him now. The weight of the Torah scroll in his hands on Saturday morning. That weight is not theatrical anymore. He has presided over the death of a woman he genuinely liked. He has watched a family grieve and felt something that was not performance. He has not told Elias this. There is no protocol for telling Elias this. The protocol assumes the asset is an asset, that the identity is a tool being worn, not a skin that has grown onto the body underneath. He is beginning to suspect that no one in Tehran has accounted for what 6 years actually does to a person. In late 2021, Cyrus does something that is not in the operational plan. He requests, through the dead drop channel, an abort discussion. Not an abort, a discussion. The message is precise and controlled. He has noted what he believes is a shift in ambient surveillance in his immediate area. 2 vehicles he has not cataloged before. A change in a neighbor's routine that could be organic or could be peripheral surveillance bleed. He is not certain. He is flagging. Elias's response comes back through the channel 5 days later. It says, "Observation noted. Assessment is low probability. Maintain position. Next scheduled extraction window is 14 months. 14 months. Cyrus reads this and understands something that the response does not say explicitly. He is not the one who decides when the bridge is walked back across. He never was. He files the response. He opens the synagogue door the next morning at 5:47. He tells no one. There is a moment in any deception operation when the story you have been told about who knows what has to be corrected. This is that moment. Avraham Katz, the 78-year-old retired judge, the man who heard the bread phrase in 2017 and smiled and said we all had Muslim neighbors, did not simply file the doubt away and continue his life. He began, quietly and methodically, to investigate. Not by contacting Shin Bet, not by confronting Yosef. He is a retired judge, not an intelligence officer, and he understands the difference between suspicion and evidence. He begins by doing what he spent 40 years doing professionally. He builds a record. He notes inconsistencies, small ones. the way Yosef occasionally pauses a half-beat too long before a piece of liturgy that any man who learned Hebrew as a child would produce without hesitation. The way he holds certain Ashkenazi and Sephardic traditions in a balance that is slightly too even, like a man who studied both rather than inherited one. The way he never speaks about his childhood in Tehran with the specific sensory detail that Iranian Jewish immigrants always carry. The smell of a particular market, the sound of a particular street. Avraham Katz has been building this file for 4 years. And in early 2022, before Mossad's task force exists, before the pattern analysis, before the surveillance operation, he makes a single phone call. Not to Shin Bet, not to Mossad, to a former colleague, a man who retired from the legal system 15 years ago and now consults on security matters in a capacity that Avraham Katz has never asked about in detail. The call is short. He describes what he has observed. He does not accuse, he presents the record. The colleague listens. He thanks Avraham Katz. He says he will make some inquiries. He does not call back. But 6 weeks later, a junior Mossad analyst begins a pattern review of surveillance photographs from the Musrara neighborhood. The task force that will eventually bring down Cyrus Tehrani does not begin with a technical breakthrough or a defector's tip. It begins with an old man who trusted his doubts just enough, and his mercy just enough, to make one phone call and then step back. The deception held for 6 years. It was not undone by intelligence. It was undone by memory. The memory of a bread phrase, spoken once, in 2017, by a man standing in a synagogue doorway on his first morning in Jerusalem. Neither Cyrus nor Elias ever knew this. They were looking for the crack in the cover. The crack had been there from the first day, and the question that now hangs over everything is this: if Avraham Katz knew, or close enough to knowing, for 4 years, what else did he see that he still hasn't told anyone? The task force that assembles in early 2022 does not agree on what it has. The pattern analysis, Yosef Mizrahi's face appearing 847 times across Musrara surveillance footage, 23 of those instances placing him within 50 meters of a confirmed dead drop location within a 2-hour window, is compelling to 3 analysts and unconvincing to 2 senior reviewers who have been in the business long enough to distrust elegant patterns. The senior reviewer who writes the initial low probability assessment is not wrong to be skeptical. He has seen confirmation bias destroy careers. He has seen innocent men flagged by pattern analysis because they happen to walk the same streets as guilty ones. He has seen the community damage caused by a wrongly accused religious figure, and he is not willing to move on a rabbi on the basis of proximity data and a Vienna grocery run. He approves passive observation. He does not approve active investigation. This is the false start. For 11 weeks, the surveillance operation watches Yosef Mizrahi and finds nothing. He opens the synagogue. He teaches. He visits the sick. He takes his usual routes. He buys his usual groceries. He is, to every observer assigned to the passive watch, exactly what he presents himself to be. 2 members of the task force begin privately discussing whether the whole thread should be dropped. One of them sends an internal memo recommending suspension of resources. The memo is received. It is not acted on immediately because the analyst designated D, the one who pulled the Vienna travel records, has submitted a supplementary request that is still pending review. The memo sits on a desk for 9 days. During those 9 days, Yosef Mizrahi changes his routine. Not dramatically, not in any way that would register as flight behavior. He takes a different route to synagogue on 3 consecutive mornings. He stops initiating a specific type of phone contact, brief, administrative calls to congregants about scheduling that he had made with metronomic regularity for 2 years. He begins leaving his apartment at times that are close to, but not exactly, his established pattern. He has sensed something. Not identified a surveillance team, not spotted a vehicle. Sensed the quality of the air around his life shifting by a degree that no instrument would measure, but that a trained person, after 6 years of hypervigilance, cannot ignore. He does not run, he slows down. And that slowing down, that almost imperceptible tightening, is what Analyst D sees when she reviews the passive surveillance logs before the memo can be acted on. She flags the routine change. She argues, in a meeting that reportedly runs for 3 hours, that a man with nothing to hide does not alter a 2-year behavioral pattern in response to nothing. She is not saying he is guilty. She is saying the pattern change is itself information. The memo recommending suspension is shelved. Active surveillance begins. The first month of active surveillance produces a near abort of a different kind. The surveillance team following Yosef makes a mistake. A vehicle is positioned incorrectly on a Tuesday morning, too close, too stationary, on a street where no vehicle has reason to be stationary for 40 minutes at 6 a.m. Yosef walks past it. He does not look at it directly. He does not change his pace. He buys bread from the same bakery he always buys bread from. He returns home. That evening, through the dead drop channel, he sends a message to Elias. The message contains a single embedded phrase within an otherwise routine image post. A phrase that, in the communication protocol, means possible surveillance contact, low confidence, awaiting guidance. Elias's response comes back in 48 hours. Low probability, maintain, do not alter pattern further. This is the incorrect assumption playing out. Elias has assessed the surveillance contact report through the lens of what he knows, which is the dead drop architecture, the communication protocol, the operational history of an asset who has produced clean reports for 6 years. What he does not know is that the vehicle was not a mistake by an incompetent team. It was a deliberate near exposure, a calibrated test to see whether the target would report upward through a channel the task force had not yet identified. Yosef reported. The channel revealed itself. Not completely, not traceable to Elias yet, but the direction of the communication, the general signature of its timing and method, is now partially visible. The task force has just learned something Cyrus does not know he has taught them. For the next 6 weeks, the operation enters what the task force internally describes as a false release phase. Surveillance is pulled back, not eliminated, restructured. Visible elements are removed. The streets around Musrara return to their normal texture. Yosef's morning walk to the synagogue is no longer shadowed by any presence he could sense, because no presence is within sensing range. He reports this to Elias. Ambient pressure reduced, possible false alarm, maintaining current pattern. Elias confirms, proceed, extraction window in 8 months, continue collection. And Yosef, Cyrus, lets his shoulders drop by a fraction of a degree. He teaches the Thursday Torah class. He has 3 teenagers in it who have been coming for 2 years now. One of them has started asking the kind of questions that smart teenagers ask when they are beginning to take something seriously. Real questions. Questions that require real answers. He gives them. Carefully. Honestly. With the specific texture of a man who has spent years thinking about these things. This is the moment where the false release becomes something more complicated than a tactical maneuver. Because Cyrus is not simply performing calm, he is feeling it. The retreat of the perceived surveillance pressure has done something to his interior state that his training did not fully prepare him for. It has allowed him to want to stay. Not as an asset. Not because the collection is ongoing and the extraction window is 8 months away. He wants to stay the way a person wants to stay somewhere they have lived long enough to love. He does not send this to Elias. January 2023. His mother is ill. The information reaches him through a channel that is not the operational dead drop. Through a personal contact, a cousin in Mossad who does not know what Cyrus is or where he really is, who simply calls a number that Cyrus has maintained at the edge of his personal architecture for 6 years, for exactly this kind of emergency. He acquires a burner phone through a third party in Tel Aviv. He is careful. The phone is clean. The purchase is not traceable to him. He finds a location near the old city walls, a spot with no camera coverage he has mapped, a position he has held in his memory as an emergency communication point for 4 years. He makes the call. 4 minutes and 18 seconds. His mother's voice is different. He knows what the difference means. He does not alter his plans. He does not contact Elias about the call. He files it in the part of himself that has no operational designation and returns to the synagogue the following morning at 5:47. What he does not know, what he cannot know, is that the phone he chose was clean in every dimension he could check. But the number he called was not. A residential address in Mossad, flagged in an entirely unrelated IRGC signals operation. A flag placed not because of his mother, not because of him, but because of a different intelligence thread that intersected with the same address through a separate family connection he has no knowledge of. The call completes the triangle. Pattern: Vienna, phone. The task force escalates to operational status the following week, and here is the near abort that almost loses everything. The decision inside the task force is not unanimous. One faction argues for immediate arrest. The cover is confirmed with sufficient confidence. The risk of losing the asset to an emergency extraction, Elias issuing a burn protocol if the asset goes dark, is real and growing. The other faction argues for extension. Let him run. Map the network. Find Elias. An arrest now yields one asset, one closed node, and a handler who vanishes into Istanbul and surfaces 2 years later with a different name and a different city and a different Long Bridge asset already in position. The argument for extension wins, but only by a decision that is made not on certainty, but on appetite for risk. The wrong call here loses the network entirely, and no one in the room is sure which call is wrong. They choose to wait. They choose to follow where the next move leads. And Cyrus Tehrani opens the synagogue door the following morning, holds the Torah scroll, leads the prayers, and does not know that the ground he is standing on has already been removed. He is standing on air. He just hasn't looked down yet. The arrest happens on a Tuesday morning, June 14th, 2023. Cyrus Tehrani steps out of his apartment at 6:12 a.m. He is wearing the same black coat he has worn every morning for 6 years. He is carrying the same worn leather bag. He is walking toward the same wooden door. He is detained before he reaches the corner. He does not run. He does not speak. He stands very still for a moment, the way a man stands when something he has been waiting for, something he has been dreading and half expecting for so long that it has become background noise, finally arrives in the foreground. The first word he says, in fluent Hebrew without accent, to the arresting officer is this: "I've been waiting for this for a long time." The officer later says it is the most unsettling thing he has heard in 20 years of this work. Not because it was threatening, because it was true. Because the man standing in front of him did not look like a man whose cover had just collapsed. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for 6 years and had finally, with enormous exhaustion, been allowed to exhale. The immediate fallout does not begin with the arrest. It begins 4 hours before it, when the task force makes the decision to move. Elias is in Istanbul. The trace on his communication channel is partial, enough to establish a general operational signature, not enough to identify a physical location with the precision required for interdiction. The task force knows that the moment Cyrus goes dark, Elias will initiate burn protocols. The network above Cyrus, the courier chain, the analytical relay in Tehran, the other nodes whose existence Cyrus himself doesn't know about, will fold inward and disappear. They move anyway, because the alternative, waiting for a cleaner shot at Elias, requires keeping Cyrus operational for an unknown additional period. And the task force has reached the edge of what controlled surveillance can sustain without itself becoming a liability. The bet is that the partial trace on Elias is enough to generate productive leads before he fully vanishes. It is not. Elias is gone within 6 hours of the arrest. The Istanbul trace dissolves into a dead address in Ankara. Then nothing. A name that was never real attached to a face that intelligence analysts believe they have seen before, possibly under a different name, in a different city, connected to a different operation. He has done this before. He will do it again. The decision to move on Cyrus, the correct decision, probably, given the constraints, has also been the decision that lets the handler walk. This is the cost that ties directly back to the near-abort argument the task force had 3 months earlier. The faction that wanted to wait was not wrong. Neither was the faction that wanted to move. They were both right about different things, and the operation could not satisfy both at once. This is what actual intelligence work looks like. Not a clean win. A set of trade-offs where every option has a price, and you pay the price of the option you chose, and you spend a long time afterward wondering about the price of the option you didn't. The intelligence assessment produced after the arrest is classified in its specifics. What has been confirmed through proceedings and official statements is this. Over 6 years, Cyrus had successfully mapped the social and familial networks of 11 individuals connected to Israeli defense and intelligence structures. Not recruited them. Not extracted classified documents. Mapped them. The texture of their lives, their relationships, their vulnerabilities, their patterns. The kind of intelligence that does not enable a single operation. It enables a generation of them. The exploitation phase, the actual use of what Cyrus collected, had not yet begun at the time of his arrest. The collection was still ongoing. The picture was still being assembled. This is the detail that the task force sits with in the weeks after the operation closes. Not that they caught him. That they caught him before the collection was used, but not before it was complete. Somewhere in Tehran, in an analytical archive that Israeli intelligence cannot access, the picture he assembled over 6 years still exists. The man is gone. The work he did is not. Avraham Katz made his phone call in early 2022. The contact he called passed the information within weeks. The task force that eventually arrested Cyrus Tehrani traces its origin, in part, to that single call. But Avraham Katz first noted the bread phrase in 2017. There are 4 years between those two dates. 4 years during which Cyrus continued to collect. During which the wedding photographs were taken. During which the Unit 8200 officer's social network was mapped. During which 11 defense-connected individuals were profiled. The Shin Bet interviewer who speaks to Avraham Katz after the arrest does not say this directly. She is professional and measured, and she thanks him for what he eventually did. But the question lives in the room between them. What would have been different if the call had been made in 2018? Avraham Katz does not ask it out loud. He is a retired judge. He understands that second-guessing a judgment call made under uncertainty is not the same as identifying an error. He made the decision he made for reasons that were not unreasonable. He lives with it anyway. This is the cost that ties back to the first morning, the bread phrase, the pause, the smile, the mercy that let Cyrus stay, the doubt that almost silenced itself entirely and decided, 4 years later, to make one phone call. The operation's outcome was shaped not by any single intelligence decision, but by an old man's private calculation about the cost of being wrong. The community in Musrara does not recover quickly. The arrest is not publicized in the way a dramatic operation might be. There is no press conference, no declassified briefing designed for public consumption. The neighborhood learns what happened through the specific osmosis of a close community, receiving official confirmation of something it can barely process. The teenagers from the Torah class stop coming for a while. 2 of them eventually return to a temporary replacement rabbi who is competent and kind, and who holds the Torah scroll with the right level of care. But he is not the same. The family whose wedding Yosef officiated does not talk about it publicly. The groom's uncle, the Unit 8200 officer, the man whose presence at the wedding set the entire exposure sequence in motion, is quietly informed of the connection. He requests a transfer to a different post. The request is granted. The synagogue continues. The wooden door still opens every morning, but Avraham Katz, who now knows what his silence cost and what his call eventually produced, still arrives at morning prayers and sits in the same seat he has sat in for 30 years. He still prays. He still stays for the conversation after. When someone asks him once how he thinks about what happened, he says, "I think about the funerals." He means the ones Yosef officiated, the ones where the mourners were genuinely comforted, the hands held over genuine grief. "You cannot tell me that comfort was false," he says. Whatever the man was, that comfort was real. And now the people he comforted have to decide what to do with a real thing that came from a lie. That is not a small thing to ask of people. He pauses. I don't think intelligence agencies think very hard about that part. Cyrus Tehrani is tried in closed proceedings. The verdict and sentence are not made public. His mother died 11 days after the phone call he should not have made. He was not at her burial. He has not been to Mashhad since 2014. The life he built in Musrara, the classes, the funerals, the Shabbat tables, the weight of the Torah scroll, belongs to a name that was never his. He cannot grieve it. There is no framework for grieving a false life. There is no protocol for the loss of a person you were pretending to be, and somehow, over 6 years, became anyway. Somewhere in Tehran, Elias is building the next bridge. Somewhere in a classified archive, the picture Cyrus assembled over 6 years is waiting for a different operative to use. And somewhere in Musrara, a wooden door opens at 5:47 every morning. The man who opens it now is not the man who opened it before. The congregation has learned to be grateful for that. They have not yet finished learning to be certain. If this story stayed with you, the ones that don't get headlines usually do, share it with someone who thinks espionage is about action. The most dangerous operations never fire a single shot. Subscribe to Hidden Ops. The next one is already in motion.